I would like to introduce you to our panelists, which they will appear one by one as I introduce them. First, Sophia Batson. She is the editor-in-chief and founder of a luxury magazine in the UK called Orchid Magazine. Sophia has worked for Elle Man, and also she's worked with Elle Italia, Cosmo Hungary, Women's Wear Daily. She's also a professional diversity and inclusion consultant. Thank you for being here, Sophia.
Thank you for having me.
Next up, we have Sergio Hudson, celebrity fashion designer. He's been a designer for Michelle Obama, Beyonce, Tracee Ellis Ross, Regina King, Mary J. Blige, Taraji P. Henson, the Kardashians, Queen Latifah, and this list could go on and on. Thank you for joining us, Sergio.
Thank you for having me.
And next up, we also have Kenneth Nicholson, the CFDA 2020 American Emerging Designer of the Year. He's been featured in Vogue, WWD, GQ Magazine, The Official USA, Hypebeast, Vice, and Refinery 29, and many more. Welcome to the room, Kenneth.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor.
And great to have you here. All of you look so wonderful. How do you do it? I know you all have busy lives, and to see you all here and dedicate your time, we are so grateful.
No problem.
Well,
I mean, it's truly amazing. I mean, I wouldn't miss this for anything. I really appreciate the opportunity just to take part and, you know, help spread the knowledge in any way that I can.
well, fellas, we have one lady on panel. And so with that said, ladies first. Sophia, you ready? I'd like to ask you, in all of the things that we've seen currently in the news, and of course, this panel discussion has come about from what we've witnessed in the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's also become a part of a trickle into other industries to have an open conversation about what we are experiencing and what we are going through. So I'd like to ask you, what does it mean to be Black in the fashion industry?
Okay, well, first of all, it means having like a much more difficult time than your white counterparts. I think sometimes it's like beating your head against the wall, but you know, if you have fortitude, mental fortitude and strength, then you can definitely forge ahead and find your path in the fashion industry. Mine was definitely founding a magazine that focuses on ethnic people. So I took that from my experience in the fashion world. Mainly, the main thing that I can say spurred me towards creating that magazine was the difficulty always as a stylist and fashion consultant in roping in photographers or magazines or brands to shooting ethnic models, not just Black, okay? Definitely it was always trying to get that done, but also other ethnicities. Anything else than what we generally call the industry standard in fashion, which is sadly for a long time has been white.
Viewers also know that we have a Q&A box. We are taking Q&A, questions and answers, at the last 30 minutes of our panel discussion. So please keep that in mind and feel free to go ahead and type questions ahead of time. Sophia, you've made many, many great points. I'd have to say that in that, I can feel how there's been some hardship in that for you. Are there examples where you can give where you've had hardship in this?
Right, well, the general difficulty in finding work okay, or people that are younger and far less experienced than you going ahead. And then you have to understand I'm originally British, okay? So I did my university education within the States, but I'm used to working probably in London, in New York, and Milan also. So I lived for 6 years in Italy. So when I speak about fashion and the racism in fashion and less opportunities for people of color, especially Black, then I speak about it from a global standpoint. So not just within the United States.
Exactly.
So hopefully that answers the question. Not without, I mean, it just takes definitely more than 5 minutes to specify exactly what it is that each of us as professionals or different types of professionals experience.
Follow-up question from Kenneth? Follow-up to it?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that sentiment that Sophia brings up. I think it's inherent when you are working within a society that doesn't necessarily prioritize your vantage point. I think working within an American sort of like societal structure, obviously Black culture has influenced the American experience. So when we talk about music, when we talk about aesthetic, a lot of us today are spending probably embarrassing amount of time online. Even the language that we see online coming up in conversations derives straight from the Black community. So I think, when we talk about Black creativity within this fashion space, it's one that you sort of have to navigate carefully. It's a knowingness that Black contributions are heavily influential within this space, but then also having to do somewhat of a delicate dance when you are the embodiment of Blackness. So I think it's sort of this dissonance that we always sort of find ourselves navigating.
Agreed. Sergio, I'd like to ask you, what have the hardships been for you in the industry? You've made it to a celebrity status fashion designer. What are the hardships that you've had to overcome, or have you overcome those?
It's a laundry list of things, but to begin, the fact that I had to become a celebrity designer just to have a business, it was not my first choice to just dress celebrities. It was my way into the business. And I think people, I'm grateful for all the opportunities that have been afforded to me by the stylists and by the celebrities. I grew my business on the backs of celebrities. But my dream was always to, be the people I grew up obsessed with, like Italia, like Terry Mugler, like Gianfranco Ferré and Gianni Versace. I grew up watching these people and idolizing them and wanting to be them. And when you get out of design school, you realize, oh, they don't want Black designers to design like that. So what am I supposed to do? And that's what I was faced with as a young designer. It's like, what I want to be, I want a business like Ralph Lauren. I want a business like Michael Kors. I want a business like Donna Karan. I want to be a great American designer, but you just don't have Black people that fit into that mold. And that's just naturally where I gravitate toward as a designer. And I think the difficulty in fashion is that they want to put Black designers in this box. And it's like 3 or 4 areas that they allow us to thrive in. And if you go outside of those areas, it's not said to you, but you feel it. It's like, how dare you compete with Tom Ford? How dare you compete with Michael Kors? Go over there and make those urban clothes and have a seat. So that's what, I feel like, and I'm sorry, I'm just really blunt. And COVID has given me, like, for lack of a better term, balls of steel. So I say whatever I want to say at this point. But I think it's not direct racism in fashion, it's indirect, and it's placemental racism. Like, we put you here, this is where you stay, this is where you thrive, and don't come over here because you can't have no parts of that. So I think my struggle has been navigating around that And I just went directly to the celebrities and said, do you like this? Can you wear it? Do you like it? And they began to wear it. And, you know, me making tailored suits for women has become my biggest part of my business. But in the beginning, it was like, you know, you kind of look like an early 90s Calvin Klein. Like, is that where you really want to go? So it's like, that's been a difficulty for me. And still to this day, it's an unspoken thing in the industry that you look at who they put to the top of the barrel as Black designers. Even if you look at, like, I'll take Kirby from Pierre Moss, they only give you like what he gives that looks urban. Like when you look at his show, it's gowns, it's ready to wear, it's beautiful things that he made for women. But it's like they don't give you that exposure. It's like, okay, we're gonna show you his Reebok. So, and I'm from the South, so I can smell racism from a mile away, and it stinks in the fashion industry.
Kenneth, do you have a follow-up?
You know, yeah, and I love Sergio. You know, we take part in, you know, dialogue and groups and stuff. And so I've gotten a chance to hear his wisdom, and he's amazing. And so I, you know, I do definitely agree with the sort of marginalization of putting you in an urban category, or something other than just a designer who creates great clothes, you know? And as an emerging brand, that is something that I'm already keenly aware of. So when I'm, you know, just looking at some of the successes that we have, I have to stay very mindful of being at the helm of a public narrative that's being written, you know? And I think that that is a unique challenge to Black designers, and it's definitely a unique challenge to emerging brands whose head designer is, you know, Black or a person of color. You know, for example, I do draw a lot from, you know, Black history and Black culture because it's rich and it's layered. But I get the sense that if I do that with a certain liberty, there may be a backlash of being like, he's a Black designer that does Black things. Whereas if, you know, you just have a white designer and they draw inspiration from, you know, Beethoven or, you know, any other sort of artist, it's not seen as, okay, this is, you know, white inspiration for white art. It's just a matter of fact across the board. And so for me, like, that's sort of the thing that I'm keenly aware of. And it's, it can be tricky, you know, navigating that terrain.
I have to say that in many ways, in my experience in the fashion industry, and I've been from everywhere from a sample room to the pattern making table, just, let's just say I have my gray hairs, okay? Even though you don't see them. It's a fine line to tread, and it's a weary road to travel. And I'm glad you both are speaking out about it, and this is the safe place to do it, most of all. Sophia, when we are looking at things that are trending, and you being the editor-in-chief of a luxury magazine, do you feel that our breaking the silence in the fashion industry is another trend? Okay,
so for me, it's not a trend. For you, it's not a trend, okay? And for everybody on this panel, it's not a trend. However, I think for other people, it is, all right? Nobody speaks out about it, all right? Most of us just continue along with our, you know, with our daily do, unless, especially if you're working for somebody or you're looking for jobs and your acceptability depends on that. So I think perhaps for other people, it is a trend, but people in general don't speak about it. They just continue on. And I think it's really quite ridiculous.
Follow-up, gentlemen?
Yeah, I just want to say, and also to your point, I think sometimes, well, maybe this is to Sophia, like, what do you think the silence comes from, because I feel like, you know, just as I'm observer, and a part of my career is I'm in a very new space. And so I would imagine that some of it is coming from, I don't know, like maybe a survival mode, or like maybe a survival tactic.
Yeah,
Right, being silent. And so I'm just wondering, you know, maybe like Sophia, you have a rich, you know, history. So I'm just wondering, where do you think that silence comes from?
Okay, so the silence comes from, okay, your livelihood and your survival, all right? Me, I don't really care because I've had great hardship, okay, as a result, partly because of race. A lot of it does have to do with race, to be honest with you. Sometimes when you add the foreign component in there too, it you know, creates added difficulty. But it has to do with your livelihood. People can't speak out, okay? It's difficult enough as it is to get jobs. And so as people speaking out, you know, that just, they're blackballed, for lack of a better word, is just going to make it more difficult for them to get hired. I mean, for designers, okay, it's just very difficult, all right? You know, you're hired or you're not hired. You can't advance generally within the structure, okay? There's one Black creative director of a major fashion house, which is at Louis Vuitton, and all of the rest, for the most part, are almost what we call the industry standard, either male or female. So it has to do with your livelihood and fear, and rightly so.
And I mean, I'll add to that. Even when I started out the collection in 2016, I was with the PR firm, and, you know, not saying that it's bad on them, but it's just how the industry was at the time. Like, I was told, okay, don't use a Black model in your lookbooks because then you'll be identified as a Black designer. And then people will assume things about you. So, you know, but even, and I listened, because when you come into this industry, it's like, I wanted to do it since I was 3 years old, watching CNN Style, Elsa Clinch, and like just getting my life as a child. I wanted to be in this industry, and I was willing to do anything to be in this industry at that time. And if I had to like downplay my Blackness, I was willing to do that. And it's hard for me even to say that now, because it's something that's in your head that you never want to come out of your mouth. But I had to face some really hard truths when this whole COVID situation started, that, wow, like I was playing into this industry, and that's what happens. We play into it and we allow it, so it keeps going. Like I was dressing celebrities, but of course when I got a white celebrity, it was like, oh wow, I got a white celebrity. Like, wow, that's as if it was more important than when I got a Black celebrity. So I was playing into that, and we play into that as Black fashion professionals, and we feed it instead of us standing up and saying, no, look, this is not acceptable. We're not doing this anymore. And it's classic separate and put us against each other, because even me saying stuff, like I've gotten in trouble for saying, you know, if you're a Black designer, they expect you to be an urban designer, or they expect you to like make, you know, the unisex clothes, or, you know, like menswear. You know, you can't just be like a women's wear designer that makes clothes, fabulous clothes that women wear. That's too lofty for a Black person to think they can do. I've gotten in trouble for that with other Black designers. They're like, well, are you discounting what we do? I'm like, no, that's what you do, and that's fine. Like, that's who you are, but that's not who I am. Where is my place at the table? Where is the designer that came up like me, that most of the people like me just give up because you can't play? Because we all know that work in fashion, the creme de la creme of fashion is women's ready-to-wear. Everybody wants that status. Everybody wants to be it's just like when they appointed Virgil to Louis Vuitton, they gave him menswear. And we were like, oh, that's amazing. Like, and it was amazing. It was great. But how much more weight would it have carried if they had gave him the women's wear?
Well, Sergio, I heard you mention a name. You and I are kindred spirits over this particular name. May we have a moment of silence for Elsa Clinch? Okay, we can go on now. Well, Sergio, since we already have you on the subject, I want to ask you something about and I'm sure you've heard of it. It's the Black in Fashion Council. Do you feel that it will help the advancement of representation?
I think it will. I'm not exactly in or sit on the board of it, but I've been in on some meetings, and I'm a part of some other groups that are affiliated with it. It seems like the leadership really wants to help, and they really want to push, and they don't want things to go back to the way it used to be. And I feel like even, you know, it's like fashion has this habit of wanting change and then cycling back to the way they used to be. And we can't allow that to happen this time.
Okay.
It's like, you get what I'm saying? So I feel like that's their goal. And we as professionals have to push them, because they are at the forefront right now, to not get comfortable and to not start playing the game, because it's so easy to fall into playing the game in this industry.
I may be, and I'll just say, you know, since it's a safe space, I may be the oldest one in this room. I don't know, Sergio, we haven't really compared our driver's licenses yet, but that is the habit. See, now you told it, now I am the oldest one, but as you were saying, it does fluctuate. And this time we want it to stick. We don't want to go backwards. Sophia, what would be your follow-up on this? Sophia?
She's on mute.
Unmute, so somebody muted me, please pardon me. Right, my follow-up on that is that we've got to keep pushing the envelope. I mean, I'm not afraid to do it. I'm outspoken about it. There are people out there who keep speaking about it, but yet at the same time, people would like to say, you know, that pretend to be allies and say Black Lives Matter, but yet at the same time, they're perpetuating the same systemic racism of which the fashion industry is rife. So we cannot keep pushing, and we can't stay silent.
Absolutely. With the part that we can't stay silent, this is, of course, what brought about discussions such as this. So, Kenneth, I want to ask you, with the public pressure, the economic pressure, have you seen improvement from the push to buy Black-owned businesses?
I have, and you know, it's not necessarily the buy Black that gives me hope. You know, I think it's the pairing of saying Black Lives Matter, which, you know, a year or two ago was completely taboo. Like if you were, you know, a non-person of color or non-Black, saying that meant that you were living on the edge, you know, or at least that was sort of like this zeitgeist, I feel. But it's the act. What I feel like is new about this moment is like there are actionable steps being laid. And so like that gives me cautious, optimistic hope that people are putting more of an emphasis on the actionable changes and less emphasis on the conversations, because conversations have been around for a while. And I think the time for conversations, it had its time, and now we got to move beyond that, and we got to take it to action. You know, I enter into the fashion space from a spiritual place, so everything I say and do is going to be connected to my spiritual practice. So faith without works is dead. You know, if we're saying, you know, support Black life and Black Lives Matter, but there is no quantifiable action being followed up with that, then what are we doing it for? You know.
When you say quantifiable action, it makes me think of the 2020 McKinsey report for the fashion industry. It is pushing the figures to say that diversity in the fashion industry, the representation, is likely to improve profit by 36%. That's a huge push of the needle just by diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like, if you don't see yourself in a particular space, then there is no context, no matter-of-fact context to move toward. You know, I'm coming also from the South. I'm from Houston, Texas. So, you know, it's a really, I mean, and I'm you know, LA based now. So the culture contrast is just night and day. And, you know, growing up Black, you know, of a particular body type, lanky, it was always assumed that I was going to go into sports or, you know, play basketball, do these sorts of things that Black Americans in the spotlight tend to do. And so when I threw out the notion that I wanted to be a designer, it was like I was speaking a different language within my community. And I think part of the reason is because there was no sort of visual, there was no representation, there was no matter of fact sort of a person out there. Like Sergio brought up, there was no sort of like, you know, Black Italia or Black embodiment of a Black person that was heading up these luxury houses. And so I think that, again, sort of adds on to this uphill battle, because you have to come against that within community, and then you have to come against that outside of the community within the professional, you know, fashion space, creative space.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's a hard push. And everything that you said resonates with me. It's a shame sometimes to think that no matter how long I've been in the industry, and then those that are coming into the industry, you feel that nothing has changed. And now we're sitting and waiting to see where we're going to go with this now. Sophia, I want to ask you, from your perspective, and also from the luxury magazine perspective and everything that you've experienced in the industry, and I'm sure is something that others resonate with. I've heard it said that we didn't create this problem, but putting the weight on us to fix it. What are your thoughts on that?
Right, but they always want to see the burden of everything on our shoulders. Okay, racism of every type. They seem to always want to put the burden on our shoulders. It is not our duty to fix. It is our duty to highlight the issue, and it shouldn't even be that. Okay, we highlight the issue, but it seems they just want to continue on with the same standard of rubbish, especially in the fashion industry, where people gravitate more so than any other industry to people like themselves, meaning same school, same race, same type of girl. The burden should not fall on our shoulders. That's just too much of a burden to bear.
Sergio, you have follow-up?
I just agree with everything that they said. I mean, to be honest with you, it's like we didn't put ourselves in this position. And at the end of the day, and the thing about fashion, that people have to understand is, I don't really believe they are racist. I just believe they are supremacists. And there's a difference between being a racist and being a white supremacist. And when you're a white supremacist, you just believe because you're white, you're better. And that's what we deal with in this industry. And what we are supposed to do is, okay, every time something gets done to us, we have to have a big to do about it. And then we get looked at like we just complaining all the time, when you can just really fix this and like include us and hire us. There are very capable people out there, more capable than some of our white counterparts. But we're not viewed as capable because we don't have white skin. And I don't think they realize sometimes that this is what's going on. Like, they don't think, you know, I just don't gravitate towards this Black person because, you know, they not this or they not that. But really, at the end of the day, it's because you're Black. And until they admit that to themselves, I don't feel like it'll be any real change without us being the ones to push for it.
Thank you.
So I've heard that sentiment too, just about, it's not, we didn't really create the problem, therefore we shouldn't be burdened with coming up with a solution. And I totally agree and stand in alignment with that sentiment. However, it
ain't reality.
But however, I feel, it is one of those things where maybe I'm just more industrious by nature, so if I come into a situation that is no fault of my own and someone is holding a gun to my head, I did not create that situation. But I don't necessarily think standing idle and waiting for someone else to change is necessarily the answer. So I think perhaps this is one of those like situations that's maybe it's a both and, because let's say that it was taken up and it was dismantled. Can there be a comprehensive solution without having the input from the people who have been affected most? Because I feel like oftentimes, when this conversation was brought up by the film industry, there was a lot of back and forth about, in order to, fix diversity, we should just have more people of color, more Black talent in front of camera. Well, it took those, Black people that were actually working within that industry to say, hey, that is not the, totality of the solution. Not only do we need to see people in front of camera, but we need people in the writing room. We need people operating the camera. We need people that are cinematographers. When Ava DuVernay came out with her film about Dr. Martin Luther King, I remember reading an article and somebody was just sort of, going on and on about how beautiful that the Black talent in front of the camera were lit, So she was just talking about the lighting director. And I just feel like it's those little nuances that need to be addressed. And I feel like in order to get to the core, there has to be input from the people that are affected most. And helping to create the solution. So, that's just sort of my take on it.
I appreciate that comment. I've heard it multiple times and I've heard from different people, and the way the both of you contributed your perspective, it's more to it. And I like the layering of it all, different experiences coming back to the same subject. So I agree. Sophia, I want to ask you, lining up with what Kenneth just said, when you hear people say, acknowledge your privilege, what does that mean to you?
Right, they need to accept that things are much easier for them because of the color of their skin, basically. And stop acting like we don't have an extremely difficult time. So people need to acknowledge that they're going to have a much easier time, and then a lot of other things on top of that. That they're just going to have a much easier time with advancement and a lot easier time societally, not just within the workplace.
Sergio, your follow-up on that?
I think definitely they have to acknowledge, or even if they don't understand or know, like, I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I got an appointment with the buyer at a very famous boutique in Los Angeles. I won't name the name. And showed them my pieces, and they loved it. They were like, oh my God, we love your pieces. Like, this stuff is amazing. Meanwhile, they're turning my stuff inside out to see the quality of the work and, trying to see exactly how I made it and asking me all these questions. And then they told me, they were like, but we buy this type of stuff in Paris. You should make your clothes more urban. Had I been white and I walked into that same boutique, that would have not been a question. They would have just been like, oh, your clothes are fabulous. They wouldn't have turned them inside out. They would have just looked at them and said, oh, your clothes are fabulous. Either they would have said, we're going to buy it, or we're not buying right now. They wouldn't have said any of that other stuff. And I think they have to acknowledge that it's easier for them. And that threw me into in for such a loop for a long time that I had to talk myself out of being angry with the industry, because I'm like, wow, like, she really said that to me, like, to my face. Like, you told me I need to be more urban. Like, don't you realize that it's not okay. You can't say that to a Black person. Like, but I just kept my mouth shut. I walked out of the store, got in my car and cried tears, but they have to understand that how hard it is for us. And when you don't acknowledge us, it's a slap in the face. And that's how I feel about that.
I'd have to say, I'm sure this happened before Michelle Obama wore your clothes, right?
It was before Michelle Obama. But we had dressed some celebrities, yeah. Dressing celebrities, and that's what I think people fail to realize, dressing celebrities will get you in the door, but once they see your face, it changes the conversation a lot of times. I'm just being honest, because a lot of people didn't know I was Black for a long time. And I would take meetings, and this big Black guy would walk in, and they're like, "Are you security for the designer that's walking in?" No, I am the designer. I'm walking in with a Nike sweatshirt on and some jogging pants and tennis shoes, and they looking at me, and sometimes with a big gold chain on, they looking at me like, "You're making these tailored suits for women and these tight-fitted dresses that are competing with Victoria Beckham, like, you're doing that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing it." They're like, "Oh, we like it. We'll give you a call," because they scared of me. So it's funny how things used to be, and I'm gonna say used to be because I'm optimistic now.
Good, good. Kenneth, I want to ask you, what does, in this day and age, and it's popped up, I'll say it's a trending hashtag, what does true allyship mean and look like to you?
You know, I think it's probably connected to the last question, you know, that you just asked. I feel like sometimes these ideas and these questions are interconnected. And so I feel like allyship, true allyship really does come from a place of authentic empathy and a willingness to understand and engage in authentic discourse. So, you know, sometimes I feel like when you're having, you know, topics of race and, you know, the white conversation piece comes up and then the Black conversation piece comes up, I think oftentimes white people feel like you're calling them bad people, you know, and that's an idea that came to me by this amazing Black feminist theorist, Professor Brittany Cooper. And it's not that you're calling white people bad people. It's just asking them to acknowledge that the system in which we all exist isn't fair. And just by virtue of them being white, which is something that, you know, they didn't have control over, just like we didn't have control over being Black, the system reaffirms that on many different levels, on a financial basis, on a social basis, on how you're treated by the law enforcement, which we all pay into, but how do we get treated by that very thing that we are all paying into? And so I think it's just a question of true empathy and a willing to have honest discourse around that. You know, like when I'm thinking about my own privilege, you know, I'm male, right? I mean, that is, and I have to acknowledge that. You know, I don't think it's the same thing, you know? I don't think we're wanting white people to get defensive. We're just saying, hey, these are the facts laid on the table. Now, how can we sort of like look at them honestly and work with them? You know, I have to look at my ableism. You know, I'm fully functioning, you know, I can walk down the street and I don't have to, you know, rely on like a ramp. And that's a very real thing, you know, but I have to look at that and I have to be empathetic. So I think it's sort of in a way along those same lines.
Sophia, you have a follow-up for allyship?
I mean, I just like people to be decent decent human beings and acknowledge what is going on. I mean, I don't necessarily need people to, you know, ally with me. Yes, I know that's the current terminology that we like to use, but just people to acknowledge acknowledge what's going on. Acknowledge what's going on. It's just really too much sometimes.
When I hear you speak of allies, I think about real allies that were allies before this whole thing even started. You know, you look at somebody like Meredith Coupe, who is Michelle Obama's stylist. Michelle Obama did not reach out to me to get clothes. Her white stylist did. She saw it important for Michelle Obama to wear my clothing. And when she called me, she said, I want you to do what you do. I want this suit from your collection, pick another color. That was the only directive I had. So she wanted me to shine as a Black designer. And this was before all of this other stuff happening. Carla Welsh, Tracee Ellis Ross stylist, she called me for Amy Poehler for the Golden Globes, which is a huge deal. Like, you have people competing, paying money, vying for those positions on the red carpet at the Golden Globes. She called me, Sergio, I need your signature dress in a sparkly color for Amy. She didn't put any other directives on me, didn't even ask for a sketch, because she saw the value in me dressing that A-list white actress at the Golden Globe. That's true allyship, actually doing something and not saying, or not giving you something that actually is going to do something to change your career, not doing something that's just for fluff. And I feel like the difference between true allyship and people posturing is they do stuff just to say they did it. And that's what I believe is going on a lot right now. Because if it was really true allyship going on, some of these vacant creative director roles would be going to Black people.
I think the term is new in trending, and it shouldn't be. And I agree with you. For the most part, when let's take a step back and we're talking about it isn't our weight to carry to educate you. In some perspective, who else is going to educate a person so that they don't fall into the trap that Sergio just said, where you're posturing? You know, maybe we should be educating just slightly, something to think about maybe. Kenneth, I do have a question for you since I have you. How can the fashion industry move forward? We've talked about this in different kind of ways. What's next? How do we push forward? How do we move the needle?
Gosh, how do we move forward? I think maybe the energy that we currently see right now, you know, in the fashion space, maybe more of that same energy that's really pushing things forward. A lot of people, you know, kind of give, you know, cancel culture a bad name. And I think, you know, that's a different discussion. But I think, you know, when you're calling people out and it's not coming just from a place to sort of like, you know, socially drag somebody, but you're actually doing it to highlight, hey, this is problematic and this has real harm attached to it. I think that is, you know, righteous indignance, and it's holding people accountable for their actions. I think for far too long, you know, absent social media, there was really no sort of democratic way to sort of come together as a collective of people that consume fashion and say, you know, let's have a conversation. Did you really like that campaign? How did that campaign make you feel last season from so-and-so? Because to me, it felt kind of, you know, problematic. And I think having those types of conversations on like a social, you know, media platform has given power to that. And so I think the onus is, it falls on the brand to hear, you know, from their so-called constituents, if you will, to say, hey, like, we're putting this out there, we're putting these images out there. People that don't live in major metropolitan cities are being shaped by this content. What is our responsibility? And so I think greater discourse, you know, and more listening.
More discussions. Sophia, your follow-up to how the fashion industry can push the needle and move forward from this point. I mean, there are many people that are of various levels in the industry, a part of our audience. How do we help them to push that needle and move forward now?
People in power need to listen. They need to take time and listen to what people are saying. And if they're not understanding, then there are lots of people out there that are professionals that are able to help them on their path. So they need to really listen to what is being said, okay? Just talking about, oh, Black Lives Matter, or support Black business, or so forth, but yet at the same time, when they have, when they're called out for diversity issues and they do nothing, then that is not acceptable. So they need to listen to the criticism which is lobbied their way, or what people in general are saying about the industry, and take their steps going forward from there.
Agreed. And for those of you who don't know, all of that lovely foliage behind Sophia, she's vacationing in Jamaica right now. So she's having the getaway I wish I could have. So Sergio, and I'm going to, because we've spoken on various projects that you're up to, and each of you, I actually want you to give me your rundown. What projects are you working on right now, and in your position in the industry that not many people have a chance to climb to, what are you doing to give back to the community? So what are you working on, and how are you re-participating in the community?
Well, what we're doing now is I'm actually about to release a home collection. It's just, I've been sitting at home, you know, after Fashion Week. It was just a devastating time for me, if I'm being completely honest. I finally had I felt like I had worked my way up to where I was at the position where, okay, this could really work. This could really be a business. I could really stop struggling. You know, I had appointments from pretty much every major retailer. And then everything crashed. So I took some time to really examine the industry and what I thought about the industry that I was operating in. And I was like, you know, I want to do something new that I love and that people are still doing now, because people aren't really buying luxury clothes right now, and they're not thinking about that. So in my plan, it was to have a home collection down the road, but I was like, I could do it now. So I decided to work on a home collection, and we're actually going to release it at the end of this month. We're starting with throw pillows, candles, diffusers, and then I've actually designed some furniture that we will be releasing next year. I'm actually sitting on a piece of it right now, but you know, so, and then we are actually putting out, with that, we're putting out some loungewear pieces, which will be like kind of wearable pajamas that you can wear in the house, outside the house. And then we will be releasing a spring collection. It'll be more cost conscious for the times and more wearable for the times. So that'll be released in September, actually. And, you know, still doing our thing and just trying to promote the business and trying to grow. And of course, with the home collection, a portion of the proceeds will be going to numerous charities that I feel like are really doing good work at the time. I mean, right now. So we still have a few of those on the table, and I'm negotiating with my team to see how much, because of course I give it all away. But you know, you got to run a business. So that's what we're working on. I didn't do the math just because at the time, the way my business operates, I work with a lot of subcontractors, and I do a lot of work myself. Like, I make my own patterns. I sometimes make my first samples myself. So I don't really have a staff that could contain, you know, making the PPE. So we didn't do that, but I'm definitely trying to figure out ways to give back, and it's so many things that I'm concerned about right now, even outside of COVID. So it's like, you don't know which direction to go in. and I'm trying to just pick one direction that I can really help and push for that. So that's what we're working on.
Oh, I'm gonna look out for that candle. You already know I'm good for at least a candle. Sophia, with your luxury magazine, what are you up to right now, and what ways are you looking to give back in the community?
Okay, so I was also decimated by COVID or Corona, as it was. Fashion Week in Milan at the end of February was cut short, and lost lots of opportunities as a result of that. So took a break, and then as far as the magazine, well, I started some columns and so forth on race and fashion to raise awareness on the issues of racism in fashion and the challenges that each of us as professionals face, whether it be designers, stylists, or photographers, and then also developing a social justice or social issues portion of the magazine. So that's what I'm working on at the moment with regard to the magazine, and of course other ventures as well.
Love it. And I can't wait to read some of the new updates, but definitely love it. Kenneth?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you know, I still echo these sentiments. So when we showed in February at New York Fashion Week, shortly thereafter, everything crashed. We had appointments, we couldn't make them. So I was really in this place of like not really sure how to move forward. So luckily and fortunately, right now we are in the midst of production with producing some of those pieces, which will be released in 2 parts. So actually on Friday, we're releasing our pre-order for 1 part from Grandma's Couch, which was the name of the collection. And then shortly thereafter, we'll be releasing pre-order for part 2. So that's very exciting. I'm also producing my first short film, which is really, really exciting. Writing is something that I've always sort of dabbled in, and I was just always wanting to do it, never really had the opportunity to. And I think in this period of slowing down and just meditating, it came to me really organically to sort of like tell a narrative, you know, about this sort of like imaginative character that lives in my head when I'm thinking about these clothes and, you know, sometimes the collection. So that's something that I'm very, very excited about. And yeah, and then I'm also working on a collection which will be released in February, which, you know, it's a more, I mean, that's a more nerdy, techie answer for you, so I won't bore you with that, but it's a great process and I'm exploring new techniques, which I'm really excited about.
We might want to hear the long, nerdy, techie answer. There may be some techie nerds in our audience.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, as you know, I don't know how familiar you are with the line, but the premise of the line is really just to sort of broaden the narrative of menswear and really create clothing that allows men and people that just enjoy the clothes to emote. And so I draw from art history, I draw from fashion history, I draw from world culture, Black culture, and so it's a very sort of like romantic client that I cater to, someone that loves to emote, right? They literally wear their emotions on their sleeves, you know, sometimes. And so being in this period, normally I sketch, but it's allowed me to sort of look inward and really get back to the basics. So when I first started doing design, I was doing a lot of draping. And so I feel like that is my sweet spot. And I feel like a lot of the techniques that are on the horizon for me to release really come out of being able to slow down and approach the dress form in a very methodical way. You know, just that allows me to arrive at really exciting techniques and really exciting ways of, you know, making clothes. That's something that I find that I can only achieve when I'm working in sort of like a 360 context around a form. And so I think just by being in this situation and really slowing down and approaching it from that point of view, it's sort of reconnected me with, you know, sort of this notion of how I felt when I first started designing at the young age of like 13, 14.
I think we all had that moment where we had no choice but to slow down and to look within, and how do they say, pivot. So we've all done a lot of pivoting, and it's all been for the good. And I appreciate that in the middle of all of your new ventures, you've made time for this discussion. And I'd like to hear from the audience. If there's any questions that they would like to ask our panelists, please take advantage of the Q&A. And let me know if there's one particular panelist that, oh, okay, hold on. Okay. I'm gonna let any one of you pick this question up. The question is, how do you redirect performative allyship, the faith that you're faced with, when faced with it? How do you redirect performative allyship when faced with it?
So I'm guessing you're meaning like when somebody comes at you and they're just doing something, just like saying something and not really wanting to do anything. They're meaning like, how do you redirect that? You have, I mean, if that's what they're asking, I think that's what they're asking. You have to educate, take the time to say, okay, if you really want to do something for me or for the movement, then you need to do this. You have to tell them what they need to do, because you can't enter a movement and do what you think needs to be done. You need to find out what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say to that.
Yeah, and I agree. I totally agree. And I feel like that sort of harkens back to what we were discussing just a short time ago about the approach of, is the remedy this sort of like hands-off movement or hands-off, approach where we say, we didn't create the problem, therefore I'm not going to touch it, And I think, if a person genuinely doesn't know, because I feel like sometimes that performative allyship is done out of an ignorance, I think that is the case sometimes. And so it's in those moments that we have to kind of step in and say, this is a better thing to do. We have a lot of hashtags. Everyone's posting like a black box. I think that's amazing if you're doing it for the right reasons, but this is better, and this moves that needle.
How has everyone felt, not to go too far from that question, how has everyone felt about the black box? That posting of the black box on social media, do you feel that that itself is performative?
I'm just gonna give a really quick answer. I mean, I felt like it was sort of like one of those communal things that, people, it was very easy to like participate in, So I say this, like it can be seen sort of like some, internet challenge of the week. And so I just felt like, well, what's being done here? Because I saw a lot of critique coming out about that specific action, and people were saying, well, is it profitable to go silent, or would it be profitable to continue, the spread of information? And I kind of agreed with that sort of latter thought. So that's my take on it.
Okay. The questions are flowing, guys. Let me see here. Sophia, what do you think it would take? What do you think it would take for us to build our own table instead of trying to make a seat at the table?
Really, people would have to be a bit more united instead of fractured. I mean, that's a very short answer, right?
Well,
no, people would have to be more united and come together instead of fractured. I think that's very, very accurate. So that's what it would take. Unity.
You think that's happening now?
Sort of. I mean, I saw a post yesterday where somebody was talking about Naomi Campbell was saying that now was the time to unite. All right. So we can't have all of these different, not different factions, for lack of a better word, but these arguments between different types of Black people, all right? It's the time to unite and make progress and go ahead that way, forge ahead that way. And if we look at other types of demographics, which I'm not going to name names, but if you look at other types of demographics that are far more united, and look what they achieve, especially within the fashion industry.
All right, next question. Anyone free to take it? You talked about allies earlier and privilege. How do you relate to individuals in the industry that have been in your life and haven't realized this till now? Example, their eyes opened because of the amazing movement that is currently in the forefront. I'll read that again.
I think it's great.
Okay.
I think it's great. I mean, I'm not the type of person to hold you to your past. It's what you do in the present and the future that matters to me. So, you know, if you really weren't concerned about us in the past and you are now, it's great as long as you're actually doing something. I mean, it was hard as, you know what, to get into certain stores, and now you have those stores calling you because they want to have more inclusion in their stores. So, you know, you can't really hold it against them that they didn't do it in the past, but they're trying to do something now. So I feel like you have to be open and not closed to people changing and moving forward. That's my opinion.
I like that, because what it is that we all have friends that we've connected with, different races, different backgrounds, different cultures, and maybe they felt, oh my goodness, you mean I'm guilty of this? How do I talk to this person now? I feel uncomfortable. And that's mostly where a lot of people are coming from. Anyone else for a follow-up? Okay, next question. How can non-Black designers help with the Black Lives Movement through the fashion industry?
You know, I think it's realizing the role and the position that you hold. And for me, I feel, you know, quick example, if you're a stylist, maybe you want to consider pulling for your clients, you know, in different contexts, not necessarily just coming to Black designers and Black creatives when you need that Black sort of aesthetic, or when you need that Black stamp of approval, because that can be very performative. But I think it's also considering, you know, this type of work when you have a white client, when you have something like the Emmys, when you have something like that's high profile, that doesn't necessarily just continue to perpetuate this notion of sidelining, you know, Black creative work into one type of context. I think that's a very real thing that can happen, and I think that's, you know, I'm sure there's a lot other, but that's something that comes to mind. You know.
All right, I have another one. What are some of the practices that you can use in your own life to keep a level head and peaceful heart when there are moments, in parentheses, I imagine y'all have had them too, when there are moments where it's easier to be angry, cry, or just hit someone?
That question is for somebody else.
Yeah, I've never really considered myself a violent person, so I'm not really sure how to speak to that. The emotional piece, again, you know, I feel like my artistic practice stems directly from my spiritual practice. And I feel like that's because I feel like, and I believe that I was truly born to do this work and born to create. I feel like it was a divine gift that was given to me. And so I do it out of place of purity. I do it out of a place of simply wanting to create beauty and to put beautiful things back into the world. And so I would just say I do prioritize self-care. I prioritize meditation. I don't read
meditation.
I don't read too much into the negative comments or commentary, because I know, I mean, look, I have been so blessed to be in this space that I hold now, and to be a nominee for, you know, the award ceremony and the CFDA. That has been something that's lived in my heart for, like, since I was a kid. As soon as I heard the acronym CFDA for the first time, I knew like that was something that I wanted to be a part of. And so it's just a joy. I mean, I just create out of joy. And so I think self-care, remembering remembering the pure reason why you got into this business to do that work. And I think those are the sort of like the tenets and things that motivate me to stay in that place of peace, because it's really not about me. It's about the work and what we're sharing, how we're inspiring the world, how are we uplifting each other, you know, how are we edifying each other. And, you know, every time I'm in a space such as this, I am just so blessed to be in the presence of just people like yourselves. And I mean, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, you know. So it's really just about giving back in a way, yeah. And not necessarily centering myself. So yeah.
Everything that each and every one of you do is a true art form, from editing and writing to designing, and it adds to the quality of life. Just know that.
Thank you.
Now, I do have another question. Besides needing money to make a livelihood, what keeps you inspired, creating and staying in this through shrinking retail and fashion industry? So besides money, what keeps you going overall?
Well, if it was the money, I don't think any of us would still be doing it. But it's sheer love. I mean, like I told you, when I was a young kid, I fell in love with this industry. And it's like, I feel like sometimes fashion is like a wayward husband. It's like you really think about leaving sometimes, but it's like you're just so in love, you have to stay. I mean, to be honest, that's how I feel sometimes. It's like you really don't have an option to leave, but sometimes you get really irritated and you want to, but it's like, what would I do if I left? Yeah. So, you know, at times it's like that, at times it's really good. And I feel like right now we're entering a moment where it could be really good. We just have to take the responsibility and make sure we don't get caught up and let it slip through the cracks. That's my answer.
Anyone else?
I completely agree. It is, I mean, fashion and art, I don't want to say love, hate, but it's a passionate, spirited, lifelong dialogue. Sometimes, you know, you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, what did I get myself into? And then other times you're like, yes, this is, you know, I'm vibing with this, and it's just like very free flowing. But I feel like, you know, that's, you know, par for the course. If you really, truly are committed to something and you love a specific thing, like you are going to experience those moments. Like, and so I just kind of concluded for myself, I would much rather go through that emotional journey doing something at my core that I absolutely love, rather than commit my life and my life's energy and my life's work to something that I did not have passion for. So.
Sophia?
I mean, I'm going to say that, yes, I'm passionate about fashion. However, more so, okay, from what I've experienced and seen in the industry with regard to racism through this magazine, then I get to combine my love of social justice and being an advocate for that with the industry in which I've spent a significant amount of time, and which is quite pleasing to me.
As the quote unquote senior of the group, I will say, I've seen many an elated, excited face come into the industry. And I always say the same thing, you know, just to find out how serious they are. I said, you know, when I went to college for this, I was told, look to the left, look to the right. One of these people will not cross the stage before you're ready to get that degree. And the next thing I tell them is that this business owes you nothing, and it does not have to love you. You have to love it. You have to remember that every single morning you get up to face this thing that you love. So bravo on all of you staying in the game of facing something that you love. So, oh, we have another question. What piece of advice do you have for any future fashionistas in the audience? Well, I already gave mine. Go ahead.
Run.
All right, flip a coin.
No, go ahead. Go.
Sergio.
Like we were just saying, I mean, it all goes back to passion. If you don't have passion for this industry, you won't make it. You know, when you go to fashion school, it's pretty much look to the left, look to the right. When you go out into the industry, look at Fashion Week, look at this designer that showed before you, look at the designer that showed after you. They might not be showing next season. That's how the industry is. So you have to have a love for it, and you have to push. I told someone the other day, you know, as hard as this thing is, I would go to my grave. If I never made it to the heights that I wanted to make it to, I would go to my grave trying. And if you don't have that tenacity and that push for it, then you don't need to be in this industry. And it's the fact of the matter, because only the strong survive.
All of us probably will make that last statement where we will go to our graves in this industry, and might I add, sprinkle my ashes at Bergdorf's.
If it's still open.
Exactly. If it's still open.
Yeah, I would just add to that, you know, advice for staying in is it's an honest conversation that you would have to have with yourself. Why are you in this business to begin with? Because if it's for a season or trends, it's not going to, because, you know, obviously those things go out of style, they come back, they're not necessarily consistent. And so I think that's a conversation for you to have. You know, when I talk about that with other people and from my spiritual place, I feel like my relationship with fashion and being a creative in this space has been a lifelong journey, and it's been a lifelong dialogue between, you know, God and myself, because at the beginning I was not supported, but there was something in me, you know, that said, keep going. And so to get to this point and to kind of, you know, think about just that internal dialogue, you know, that I felt like, you know, I was having with God, my higher source, whatever you guys believe. It's been a journey, and it's been a good one. And it is true, because there's been times where I wasn't supported, again, because there was no sort of matter of fact example of a Black body holding space for high-end design. And so I would just say, have the honest conversation with yourself in your quiet time, and really try to sift through the authentic reasons of why you want to participate in something like this.
Exactly. Well, I think we'll wrap up on the question Q&A, because we need to choose someone to give away the giveaway to. So there are 2 audience members that will have a lovely giveaway from the reset. And we would love to, of course, thank our wonderful sponsors, HERdacity, Shop LC, Domain Northside, and the Reset. And we'd like to thank Carla Nelson for her vision to educate more Black professionals and entrepreneurs and fashion hopefuls, and to give them a sufficient scholarship so that they can chase their dreams. As she said, my fashion dream was deferred, and she created Black Fashion World Foundation, so your dreams don't have to be deferred. So we appreciate you. We appreciate our panel members. And also the person that may have, or the two people that may have been fortunate enough to win the giveaway, you will be notified directly. So we are keeping you in some bit of suspense. You know, sorry, not sorry for that. But overall, do any of you have any last words of wisdom?
I guess I'll start it. I will say this, and I want to go back to one of the other questions. What can allies do? I really believe that there has been a certain amount of damage done in this industry for generations now. And I do believe that we can rectify some things. And I believe that, you know, certain things need to be done. Like, we need to have a Met Gala exhibit that focuses on Black designers, that honors Patrick Kelly for the work that he did, honors Jeffrey Banks for the work that he did, honors Willie Smith for the work that he did. And they never got acknowledged like they should by the mainstream fashion industry. And I feel like it's a lot of things that need to be rectified in this industry. And if people really want to move the needle forward, that's a way to show penance, so to speak, for being ignored for so long. And I personally am going to make it my mission to have these people acknowledged, because I feel like we cannot move forward into the future until we acknowledge the past. So that's that's the message that I wanted to put out there today, and let people know that, you know, this is what you can do. You have to acknowledge, and you have to make meaningful change. And we can't make meaningful change until we acknowledge the past. So That's it.
Anyone else with words of wisdom before we finally wrap up?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely, from Sophia. So change can be spoken about, you know, from here and there, you know, and take a lot of time speaking about it. But the change in going forward depends on the people that are hiring and the people in power. So it's one thing to post things about Black Lives Matter or things of that nature, but it is one thing completely different to actually go forward. So it is, if they don't understand what it is that needs to be done to help them on the path to making their teams or their paths more diverse, then they need to definitely take some time to figure that out. It's not just okay to just remain in the speaking about the issue arena. We wish to go forward from here.
Kenneth?
Yeah, you know, I'm thinking about like a common refrain that Professor Cornel West always says, and he always cites tradition, you know, and highlighting the tradition of the Black American experience. And so I would just impart, especially to, you know, aspiring designers of color, is to recognize that rich tradition that we come from in this country. You know, when I'm creating my work, I'm thinking about the contributions to music. I'm thinking about the contributions to aesthetic and to art and to invention and to intellectualism. I'm thinking about everything. And so like, that is the tradition that I'm working. And so if we are fortunate to be Black designers today in this space, we own that. We own that tradition and know that our ancestors are backing us up. Heaven is backing us up, and we're just doing this work.
All right, panelists, thank you so much again for all of your time, your effort, your talent, your positive energy, your experience, and for being a part of this panel. Absolutely. And for showing your time and experience and wisdom with our audience. So, you know, thank you. Thank you. And
thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Mm-hmm.
In ending remarks, just remember, this is not a movement. This is not a moment, Ashley. A lot of people think it is a moment, but it is not a moment. It is a movement. And I challenge all of you to continue the conversation. As I like to say, a smile is always in style. Keep it fashionable.